So I wanted to make a video about the woman's body being an altar and answering the question of when men are obsessed with bodies or sex and they like other men, does that apply? So if you didn't see my last post where I did the nude yoga on the bed, which was a fun post to do. But in the caption, if you read it, I talked about how I think men are misunderstood. I think a lot of men don't know their true value. They don't understand what divine masculinity means when it comes to their sexual energy, and in particular with their penis or their phallus or their lingam. And so because they don't know how to properly use it, or they don't know the spiritual context of the purpose of it, a lot of times they get led astray and they invest in other things like porn, hypersexuality, sleeping with a lot of people, obsessing over those things because they don't really know what the spiritual meaning or purpose of their sexual energy is when it comes to like themselves, and also when they are craving being connected with someone else. And a lot of men may argue that they just want sex or they just want pussy or whatever. But I don't believe that. I believe that men are naturally pleasers. I think they like to provide. I think they like to protect. I think they are the protectors of peace. I think that they are also the providers of pleasure, essentially. So a lot of times women are seen as the ones that bear the brunt of, like, why things are sensual and why things are sexual, because society has taught us, colonization, capitalism has taught us as a public to objectify women's bodies and our sexuality. However, I know that women are the vessel for the creative life force. Like, we are creative energy, right? So our job is just to be naturally who we are. And I think men's job is to protect that and to help us heighten that. So you think about a man inserting his penis into a woman, and really his main objective should be to be present, to be fully present, fully embodied, and to be able to hold that erection with sturdiness and stillness, moving with her to help her, create enough friction in order for her to elevate her consciousness through her sexual energy. So that requires, like, him to feel safe, for him to be strong and steady, and create stillness so that she can create the friction. Now he can also, like, create it, but usually if you think about a man when he makes love, and he's doing a good job, it's more like paying attention to the woman's body and then moving slightly, making adjustments so that she continue to have a lot of heights. Now he can turn her, he can move her in positions, he can direct her, but there has to be this kind of poise and discipline about him in order for him to be able to get the woman where she needs to be. And that's his. I feel like when a guy is making love, that's really the most important skill, is to be intuitive and to be disciplined and to have stillness and to stay strong and sturdy where she needs it. And then from that space, you can get more creative and stuff. But I feel like the more feminine role is to just let go, let be, and, whereas the guys, or the more masculine role, is to be a little bit more contained. Not that the guy can't make noises or moan or any of those things, but when you're playing the more masculine role, whether you're a man or woman, it's not really about gender. It's more about you playing the role of containment and sturdiness and stillness. And that's what divine masculinity is there to provide. But someone had asked the question about, well, what about when men are attracted to other men? It's not really about gender. it's about the roles that you're playing in creating polarity. So, and Tantra is really big on like opposing forces coming together to create the Big Bang, to create, which the Big Bang when you're having sex is the orgasm. So you have to have like something that's open and something that's closed, and then something that's, and then these like opposite forces coming together to create friction. That, and that movement and that frequency is what allows for combustion, that allows for chemistry, because you have the opposite coming together and creating something new, not necessarily the same, doing the same thing. So when you have a man that is maybe making love to a man or anything, because you've got a lot of things going on now, with, you know, how people identify and how they are expressing themselves sexually. Even if you just think about your hand, the hand, when you close your hand around the penis, that's the opening. That's the feminine role. And then your lingam, or your penis that's going inside the hole, is playing the more masculine role. So when you are stroking yourself, you're mimicking what an opening of a feminine energy is. And even your movement up and down, this is a feminine movement. I'm not saying feminine as sissy, but it's creating the friction by moving up and down. And you're getting the friction because your penis is staying sturdy, right? And the friction is what's like making it get hard. And that's why when people talk about that when women are being penetrated, they're the ones that are getting something done to them, as if they're being ran through, and that women do absorb a lot of energy, that's true, but it's not like something's necessarily being done to them. Something's also being done to you, because without that friction and without that movement and without her excitement, you're not really going to get a lot out of it. So back to the point at hand, as far as like, it doesn't really matter if it's a man or woman. It's about one person playing a masculine role and one person playing a feminine role. And I'm talking specifically about divine masculine energy. And when you are living in your divine masculine energy, sexually, the purpose is to create sturdiness, to create friction by being still and having discipline and staying, you know, stern and strong and hard. Like that's the masculine energy. And then the feminine energy is all this around it. And so if you lean more into your masculine side, then the purpose, the divine purpose of leaning into your masculine side is to help facilitate enough strength and sturdiness and not necessarily aggression, but intensity, as far as like, because there has to be an intense fire in order for there to be like a strong, sturdy energy that stays in place, right? There has to be this regular flow of like energy that's fiery and like keeps things sturdy and strong and erect. So that's your purpose. And so but the spiritual side of it is that you're staying contained and you're staying strong because you're helping facilitate pleasure. Without your strength and without your focus and without that fire and without that intensity, it's hard to create that friction. So, so even if a man is entering another man, it's still somebody's playing the feminine role and you're playing the more masculine role, and you are helping facilitate pleasure to help them get to another level. You're still helping that person, no matter what the gender is, you're helping facilitate enough friction for the Big Bang, for an expansion of consciousness, right? Like, so you have to expand your thoughts and how you see sex and how you see sexual alchemy. Like, it's not about gender roles. It's not about how something looks. It's just how the universe works. It's just the way it is. If it's a outlet, sorry about the shakiness of the camera, but you have, in order to create electricity come in your home, you have the input and then you have the output. So this is input, or you have, the plug I forgot what this thing is little called, and then you have the outlet on the wall that goes in. That's how you connect and create electricity, and you create an avenue. Now, if this breaks, or if it's not sturdy and hard, then the electrical current can't come through. And if the opening is closed off or blocked off, then the electricity can't come through, and you can't create like all the things that you get to have through electricity if something happens, right? So that's just how the universe works. That's just how things work. And that's the divine role of masculinity. Now, men can also switch roles, and they can be more feminine in receiving, whether it's through receiving from another man, or if it's being pegged, because your prostate, your G-spot is near your prostate, and we know we get through the G-spot for a man, or his prostate, through the anus. So, and when you're playing that position, the person that has playing the more masculine position, whether it's through some type of toy, dildo, or another man, then they are ushering you into pleasure and expansion and energy, and then you're being more submissive. And when that person is doing that, even to a man and hitting their G-spot, they have more intense orgasms, so they have the ability to reach new heights in pleasure, which can then lead to more expansion and consciousness depending on where they are with their energy. Now, a lot of people keep their energy in their lower 3 chakras. So if you are your lower 3 energy centers, so if you're just expanding like things that aren't connected to higher intentions, and that could end up being very lustful. It could be about instant gratification. There could also be a lot of guilt and shame. There could be a lot of expansion of the ego. You might be obsessed with power. Then, you know, your sexual energy will amplify that. But the spiritual context, so the purpose of when you get into the higher chakras or the higher energy centers with your sexual energy is actually to expand. And I know that I've kind of gone off into a lot of different subjects. That's why I like to script these videos. But I just wanted to come on here and talk and to answer that question so that you could start to think a little bit more expansive about sex, sexuality, sexual energy, and as men, your divine masculinity, and the purpose of this kind of lustful energy, this need to want to stick your penis in everything. There is a spiritual context and purpose to why you feel that biologically, energetically, emotionally. That what's happened is that I think people who wanted to control people's behavior realized the power of this. They learned it from other cultures. They studied it, and they're like, oh, if we can get men to think their sexual energy is for conquering women, or for treating children badly, poorly, or whatever else men are taught that their sexual energy is for, or is strictly just for pleasure and making you feel good, then we can easily distract them so that they're not using it for the purpose it was, the higher purpose that it was intended. If men knew that they held a spiritual purpose with their sexual energy, with their lingam being sturdy, they would be, I think they would have not necessarily more pride, but they would have more honorable intentions with how they used it, who they used it, and who they used it for, and who they used it with. Not saying that they wouldn't just do it for fun, but sex in general is way more gratifying when there's a loving intention attached to it, when there's connection with it. And I actually think that's why a lot of men are suffering from ED, because what happens, especially as you get older, and you're not young anymore, and you're not like a little puppy dog anymore, if you don't bring spiritual purpose to that, then it kind of starts to die off, because you can't grow and expand without love and without your higher self, because you're only using your lower self. So then you get burnt out, and then you're constantly reaching for things to feed your ego in order to keep going, but you burn parts of yourself out when you don't use your whole self, because you're not being efficient, and that becomes apparent as you get older. So an example of that, I know this video is getting a little long, but an example of that is I used to be a runner, and I ran track in college, but I did not have the best alignment when I was running. And I didn't really have the best coaches, but I had a lot of natural talent. So a lot of the running that I did, because didn't have the best posture, and because nobody corrected it, a lot of my strength when I ran was in my thighs. That's why I have such muscular thighs, because I ran in a way, I didn't run from my center, I didn't run from my core. And then after I had children, I used to run a lot. I used to run with the front of my body a lot more, but my glutes and my core wasn't very strong. And then having children and the separation of muscles created more of those imbalances that already existed. But I was able to run with Olympians after I had children. I got really fast, but I got injured because at a certain point, especially when I started to get closer to my 30s and when I was 30 and after that, those imbalances became worse. And then my knees started having issues. I started kind of having hamstring issues because my body, I wasn't able to run efficiently. I was overusing certain parts of my body and I never corrected it. And then by the time I became aware of it, my knee had already been worn out, and like I probably could have gone back if I had the time and corrected those dysfunctional patterns, but it would take a while. It took a lot of investment of money, and then by that time, a lot of certain parts of my body had worn down, like a lot, especially like my left knee. I had surgery, ACL surgery, when I was in like middle school. So like there was still only so much I could do. So that's what happens, and essentially with men, like you go for a very, very long time, ever since you're a teenager or hit puberty, depending on a very kind of ego-driven, the physicality of sex. And then when you get to your 40s and your hormones go down, or you're not creating those same growth hormones, and you can't be as dependent on like your hormone levels anymore, and then your body and your soul is needing more of a well-rounded experience in order to get an erection, but you don't realize that you're trying to get off like you did when you were a teenager, and your body is just tired because it's overextended, because you've been doing that for so long and it's not efficient, and you don't have the same hormone levels. And then on top of that, you probably have more bills, you might have children, you have a lot more stress. So your body is just depleted and it's worn out because you're not using all parts of yourself. Everything is energetic. Everything is energetically fueled. So if you're not using your energy efficiently, and I'm talking about energetic centers, so if you're just using your lower 3 energy centers and you're not using the higher 3 at all, and you don't know how to circulate your energy, you don't know how to connect and feed off of connection with another person, then you're going to get burnt out. But that's all I want to say. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I hope that it made sense. And if you have any more questions about any of this, just leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.